Game of Thrones will end soon, so this is the right time to discuss what the show has been about all along and what the main point of Season 8 will be. This is probably my most important video about the TV show, but it's also the hardest one to explain, so I've thought a lot about how to lay out what I need to tell you. It might seem a little odd at first, especially if you haven't read the books and thought about Azor Ahai, but if you hang in there to hear the full explanation, I think you'll be happy you did. Daenerys Targaryen is chosen to lead the primitive, nomadic, warlike Dothraki. Jon Snow is chosen to lead the primitive, nomadic, warlike wildlings. Their stories are telling us about an ancient man, the man who ultimately became the Night King. That man lived 8,000 years before Dany and Jon, and he did crucial things as a regular person before he transformed into an ice monster. One of those things is that he was chosen to lead a group of primitive, nomadic, warlike people in Westeros. The ancient man and his people were in a war, and he believed they were going to be wiped out, just like Jon and Dany are now afraid that their people will be wiped out by the White Walkers. The ancient man was told that he could save his people by a magic ritual, but that only death can pay for life, so the ritual required the sacrifice of a baby. Would you murder a baby to save the world? His answer was yes. He killed the baby and won the war, but magic and prophecy have unintended consequences. A catastrophic natural disaster occurred, and it brought on the Long Night and the White Walkers. The world, as people had known it, was destroyed. And even though the Long Night ended, the new world that grew out of it was a broken world. It was a world created by that one ancient guy. He was the father of that new world and everyone in it. In Season 7, Jon Snow says this to Daenerys: "You and I and Cersei and everyone else, we're children." Yes, they're children, and the Night King is their father. That ancient man was the founder of House Stark, House Lannister, House Targaryen, and everyone else as well. All the people we see are his descendants, his children. And the world they live in is his world, stained by his original sin, his moral abomination in killing the baby. In Season 6, Septa Unella reads this to Margaery Tyrell: "If not for a single sin they concealed, they were saved." The Night King's ancient sin has been concealed forever, but the trees remember, and Bran Stark can find out. I don't know whether the show will go there explicitly, but I guarantee that this is driving the plot in the background. For 8,000 years, this new world bore the scars of that ancient sin. It was a world marked by patriarchy, because the baby had been a girl who was supposed to be a queen. The ancient man not only killed that baby girl, but also was responsible for her mother's death. So two women who should have ruled were killed, and a man replaced them. And ever since then, men have ruled. This world has also been marked by slavery. After the ancient man killed the woman, he transformed into an ice monster known as the Night King, and he enslaved people by making them his zombie minions, mindless marionettes controlled by him. It was a form of enslavement that was the precursor to millennia of slavery. After the Long Night, the Night King went away, but that didn't mean he had lost. In a crucial way, he had won. The world he left behind was his world. And it stayed that way until now. Until some important people were born: Daenerys Targaryen, Jon Snow, and maybe Tyrion Lannister. From birth, they were destined to threaten this world that the Night King created. Daenerys alone became a breaker of chains, ending slavery, as well as a female ruler, ending patriarchy. Their births woke the Night King from his long slumber because he needed to preserve the world he had created. George R. R. Martin often tells us that ice preserves. So there's a wonderful irony at the heart of the main story. It looks like the Night King is trying to destroy the world, whereas our heroes Dany and Jon are trying to preserve it. But the opposite is true. The Night King is trying to do what ice does: preserve the world he built, with its patriarchy and slavery. If he prevails, the world will be ruled by him, a man, and everyone in it will be his zombie slaves. Dany is trying to do what fire does, destroy this immoral world so it can be replaced with something better. When those two sides fight each other in Season 8, the crucial thing to remember is why the Night King's world turned out so badly. It was based on an original sin, killing the baby. Now Daenerys and Cersei will probably have babies in Season 8. Suppose they believe that killing a baby is the only way to save humanity from the White Walkers. Should they do it? Absolutely not. That decision is what got us where we are now. The new world has to be different and better than the old one, and that requires building it on a foundation of good rather than evil. When you're faced with an impossible choice, kill a baby or let everyone die, you need to find an imaginative solution that doesn't involve either of those unacceptable options. And that imaginative solution probably involves sacrificing yourself rather than someone else. Okay, that was a lot. Did I make all this stuff up out of thin air? No. The books and the show have hidden all this information in plain sight from the very beginning. When the first book came out in 1996, George R.R. Martin wrote a summary of the story on the back cover, and the first sentence of that summary was this: "Long ago, in a time forgotten, a preternatural event threw the seasons out of balance." That event was the apocalyptic natural disaster that destroyed the world as it had been and brought on the Long Night. We see echoes of that world-destroying apocalypse in the Doom of Valyria, a series of volcanic explosions that Tyrion and Jorah talk about while they sail through the ruins of Old Valyria. And we see echoes of it in every wildfire explosion, like Summerhall in the books, or in the show, Cersei's murderous destruction of the Sept of Baelor. As I said in my video about King's Landing, I can practically guarantee that we'll see this in Season 8. There will be a massive wildfire explosion that destroys King's Landing and represents the modern version of the ancient fiery apocalypse. King's Landing, with all its evils, needs to be destroyed so that a better world can be built in its place. But it can't be destroyed by some evil blood magic ritual like the one where the ancient guy killed a baby with the goal of saving the realm. That ancient evil act gets referenced a lot in the show. In Season 1, Varys says this: "We who presume to rule must sometimes do vile things for the good of the realm." And what brings Varys to say that? It's his advice to King Robert to murder a young girl, Daenerys Targaryen. Grand Maester Pycelle agrees, saying, "Is it not wiser, kinder even, that she should die now so that tens of thousands might live?" That's the sort of thinking that leads Stannis Baratheon to murder another young girl, his daughter Shireen. In both cases, the justification was that war requires this sort of sacrifice. That's also what Tywin Lannister says about the Red Wedding. He tells Tyrion, "Explain to me why it is more noble to kill 10,000 men in battle than a dozen at dinner." This all goes back to the ancient event. In the scene where we see the Night King being created, a child of the forest explains to Bran that we were at war, we were being slaughtered. So this moral dilemma, do I kill an innocent to win a war and save thousands, is at the heart of the story. What about the idea of destroying a bad world and building a new and better one? In Season 7, Tyrion says this to Daenerys: "If we want to create a new and better world, I'm not sure deceit and mass murder is the best way to start." Tyrion also tells Dany, "I believe in you and the world you want to build." Daario says about Dany, "I want to see what the world looks like when she's done conquering it." Jon Snow says that people believe Dany can, quote, "build a world that's different from the shit one they've always known." So it's clear that this idea of building a new and better world is a major theme, and it's tied to the idea that this better world can't be built on an evil foundation. Jon tells Dany that if she burns cities, then you're not different, you're just more of the same. Tyrion says that if Dany uses deceit and murder, then how are you different from all the tyrants that came before you? The Night King was the first of those tyrants. He built the world on evil, and now Dany and others need to fix it with good. But to fix it, they need to destroy the way it is now. It's very interesting that there's another would-be ruler who doesn't share the view of Jon, Tyrion, and Dany that the new world needs to be built morally. In Season 7, Cersei is described this way by Jaime, quote, "When people are living peacefully in the world she built, do you really think they'll wring their hands over the way she built it?" That was the Night King's thinking. He built a new world and decided it wouldn't matter that he'd built it on an evil act. But it did matter. It condemned his descendants to 8,000 years of injustice. Both Cersei and Tywin talk about wanting to launch a dynasty that will last 1,000 years. That's the same language the Nazis used, which probably isn't a coincidence. The Night King achieved such a dynasty. His world has lasted much longer than 1,000 years. But that doesn't make it right. Late in Season 6 and throughout Season 7, we see the beginnings of a reckoning for what the Night King did. What he did was cause the deaths of 2 women, the baby girl and her mother, and by doing so he brought on an apocalypse. At the end of Season 6, Cersei, a woman, blows up the Sept, which symbolizes that murderous apocalypse. So that's one version of the reckoning. It's basically a revenge version, where the Night King gets replaced by a woman who does evil things like he did. In that same episode, Arya murders a father, Walder Frey, and his 2 sons. When a woman kills a father and his sons, it parallels the ancient man killing a mother and her daughter. This, again, is revenge. And the ancient man's act resulted in mass death, which we see in the first scene of Season 7, when Arya murders all the men of House Frey. She doesn't kill Walder Frey's wife, or any of the serving women in the hall. So when Arya walks out, all the women are alive and all the men are dead. This is vengeance, a woman killing men, just like the ancient man killed women. We see a different version of the reckoning in the middle of Season 7, when Daenerys orders the execution of Randyll and Dickon Tarly. Just like the ancient man caused the deaths of a mother and daughter, a modern woman is causing the deaths of a father and son. This isn't vengeance like what Arya and Cersei did. Arya smiles when she killed Walder. She even says that the last thing he'll see is a Stark smiling down at him. Arya also smiles when she exterminates the Frey men, and Cersei smiles when she blows up the Sept. By contrast, Daenerys doesn't smile when she executes the Tarlys. So this is more like justice. But it's an imperfect justice because, as Tyrion tells Dany, maybe the decision was too rash, and maybe the son didn't deserve to die. At the end of Season 7, we see a better version of justice. Sansa and Arya, 2 women, sentence a man to death. The man is Littlefinger, who clearly deserves what he gets, and there's even somewhat of a judicial proceeding in which he has the chance to argue on his own behalf. So a man's ancient crime against women is being answered now, but it's essential for it to be answered the right way, with justice rather than vengeance. The modern women who rule need to be better than the ancient man was, so they can build a world that's better than his world. I should also note that vengeance and justice are not the only 2 options. A third option is forgiveness. Jon Snow forgives the Karstark and Umber children in Season 7 for the sins of their fathers, and Jon Snow also tells Theon that, "What I can forgive, I do." Some people like Littlefinger deserve justice, whereas others deserve forgiveness. A blend of those 2 things will probably be a major theme in Season 8. Bottom line, this entire story is about an ancient injustice committed by the man who became the Night King. He thought that his only choice was to kill a baby to save the world. But there's always another choice. The modern heroes like Dany and Jon will find that other choice. Instead of sacrificing someone else, they will probably sacrifice themselves.